Up next, we have one of the Tiny Hippo guys who went over to RIM now. So this is Gord Tanner, and he's presenting on CordovaJS. JavaScript is magic. Is that?
Yeah, that'll do.
JavaScript is magic.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Gord Tanner. I'm at Research in Motion or BlackBerry. You can follow me on Twitter at Gord Tanner. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the CordovaJS project and how we got started with that. First, little disclaimer. My theme today is My Little Pony. I'm sorry, but it's funny. So if you don't like My Little Pony, it's going to be an awkward 20 minutes. Starting now. So also, I thought it was hilarious that last night we ended up at the GitHub party, which was at Dig-a-Pony, which was just serendipitous. Their happy birthday to Phil. So a little backstory on how I ended up involved with Cordova. So I came from a company called Tiny Hippos. Dan and myself, and there's Brent and a couple other, PJ. We started a company called Tiny Hippos as a consulting company, just doing mobile development and web. And we were finding the tools were really lacking. So while we were doing consulting work, building apps, we ended up building the Ripple emulator, which, how many of you are familiar with that? Yeah, it's basically a Chrome extension that turns your browser into a mobile phone emulator for emulating mobile web, PhoneGap, Cordova, like WebWorks. So Dan's going to be talking about that later. I won't get into too much detail. But what we started on was a platform called Jill. It was really neat. We're pretty psyched about it. It was a web platform that allowed us to inject APIs in and basically do pretty much what PhoneGap does now, but targeted specifically for a few phones. Then something was weird happened where Jill kind of was waning, and Dan actually discovered PhoneGap. We started seeing rumblings of this neat other like cross-platform web tooling, and so Dan went off and played with it for a little bit, got first run Ripple support for Cordova and for PhoneGap in there, and it was pretty cool, and we were pretty psyched about the style of the APIs. Felt neat. We really liked that it followed the dApp spec. Really liked the kind of following what the W3C was hoping to do. It just felt really, really what we wanted the web to be like on mobile. So basically, early on in this, we went off and decided to get a little bit better support. This was I discovered the mobile spec at Friday one evening. I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. As someone who spends their time emulating runtimes on devices, having a suite of tests to run in your phone to see what your support is brilliant. So we started off about 123 tests failing at that time, and over the course of the weekend, I brought it down to about 15 tests failing. And just stubbing in stuff, just getting the bare minimum on a lot of these tests just to pass. And it was a really cool experience, and I was pretty psyched about that. And we were thinking, this is pretty cool. We reached out to the PhoneGap guys, and they reached back, and they're like, holy cow, this is pretty epic. But as we were doing this, as time progressed, we got PhoneGap 1.0 support. We always knew that we wanted to do it a little better. All the platforms we had emulated before were targeted specifically for devices. They were tied pretty close to native. So our traditional way of emulating, we would dump objects right on window before your code would run. So window.navigator would be our window.navigator. Navigator.geolocation was our complete implementation of geolocation. So, which was really cool for all these platforms that didn't have a JavaScript layer, but PhoneGap had this JavaScript file that you would include in. And kind of looking into it a little bit more as we were getting closer and closer emulation support, we noticed the PhoneGap.exec method. And it was really neat watching that all these platforms were working together to kind of funnel all these calls through this bridge to native. And we thought we really should be emulating at that level to truly bring Ripple to an environment emulator rather than us supporting our entire own implementation of PhoneGap, which what we originally did. Basically, providing what a native platform would provide to run PhoneGap. So we had a problem. Basically, because the way we emulate, we get into the window object very soon. But we couldn't get in there later, or else things wouldn't work. So we used a concept called a honeypot. It was just kind of something I like network security. And I always like the idea of like on your network, you would have like these computers that are there, and they're like really like attractive targets for like anything malicious. And so someone would like log in and start hacking like what they think is a mail server or a web server. It's really just there to like bait them into it and log their activity. So basically what we ended up writing was a little module called Honeypot that allowed us, through the sheer disgusting awesomeness of JavaScript, to change anything we wanted, to make anything mutable. So we can lay little like traps on the window object. So when someone goes var PhoneGap equals something, rather than PhoneGap being equal to what they originally wanted it to, we would intercept that call and set it to what we wanted to, or like augment what they were going to set. So that basically allowed us to kind of like at the bottom there, which you probably can't see. So let's zoom in really. So allowed us to basically like require in our bridge for Ripple and monitor PhoneGap exec and return our bridge. So all of a sudden, we ended up being a native platform, being a true kind of emulation layer for PhoneGap. And we were really psyched about this. And we like called out to the PhoneGap guy, got on the call, and we're like demoing it. Like, this is pretty cool. What do you guys think? Is exec really what we think it is? And they were pretty psyched about it. And they really liked some of the insights we brought into how to emulate PhoneGap, how to like structure our JavaScript, just some of the stuff we kind of did by having to be a cross-platform like mobile emulator written entirely in JavaScript. And we were all pretty psyched and happy about where that was going. And they're like we can take this much, much further, because there's Ripple on one end and PhoneGap Cordova on the other. And we're kind of almost doing similar things. And some of the stuff we're learning over in Ripple really would apply to what the PhoneGap guys were doing. So where does that bring us now? That kind of spawned some talks saying, OK, we have these problems in our JavaScript layer. We'd really like to have you help. So they would approach us. We like talked a little bit about the inherent problem of what was currently in the JavaScript layer. So at that time, every single platform for PhoneGap had its own JavaScript file. And it was largely the same. Like, so a lot of the JavaScript was a direct copy from platform to platform, with small, subtle differences based on if it was iOS or Android or BlackBerry. And this was something that we could deal really well with Ripple, because we were good at handling multiple devices, handling multiple platforms. That's what we did in our code base to emulate. So we thought we could take the awesomeness that is Cordova, the awesomeness that what PhoneGap was doing, and combine inspiration from Ripple and really make something much quote unquote better. I have no idea where I found that picture, by the way. So I was brought. I went to RIM, went to BlackBerry. It's like, I'd really like to spend a lot of my time helping out PhoneGap, helping out this project, and like got 50% of my time devoted to it, which in reality was 100% time, because I just did it instead. And I joined on as a contributor, helping out. So one of the early kind of like not hiccups, but just differences with the way we've approached JavaScript was we came heavily from Node. We love Node.js. We embraced the CommonJS module pattern like hardcore, because everything we did was pre-bundled JavaScript. So we just kind of bundled everything up into the CommonJS style module. So we could run our tests in Node, we could run our tests in the browser. It was just what we were familiar with. Those of us who are familiar in the web realize how wrong CommonJS is for doing web content. So it was brought up really quickly that, what about AMD Modules? And we kind of discounted it pretty fast. But talking with James Burke, talking around a bit with like some of the guys, weighed the pros and cons of each of the module framework, and really, like some of the ideas of Require.js, some of the ideas of AMD Modules really resonated well with us. I really like the concept of like loader plugins. I really like the concept of actually defining, because all we were doing to simulate Cordova CommonJS was running our code through like a pre-build step to wrap them in defines blocks, which is almost basically what AMD Modules does. So a little bit of like talking. I came around. I said, you know what? This is actually kind of cool, but we don't really need everything that AMD had. So we found a really awesome like compromise and ended up writing our own little module framework, because JavaScript needs another module loader. So Cordova.require, Cordova.define, which is currently in the JavaScript layer, is just a really streamed down version of like a AMD loader or a CommonJS style loader. It's just bare minimum of what we needed to boot up our platform, what we needed to do our plugins. So we went off. Once we got that kind of initial like framework, we threw together a prototype. I flew over to Vancouver, hacked with a bunch of the familiar faces around there, brought some whiskey, and I guess that's Zelda there. But yeah, so really quickly over the course of a few days, we managed to get CordovaJS booting on a couple devices. We got it on BlackBerry and Android in a couple of days, just as a module, as plug-in APIs. And it was really kind of cool. We had a lot of cleanup to do, but it just kind of proved that this approach of how we did things in Ripple would really translate well into the PhoneGap JavaScript layer. So bear with me. I'm going to try showing you some of this stuff. So like I said, a lot of the inspiration of where CordovaJS is now came from Ripple. So one thing we were really psyched about was we wanted to run our builds in the console. We're console guys. We were all running Linux or Macs, and so we wanted to build our stuff in console. So you can see right from CordovaJS, we have a Jake file, which is basically Jake is a JavaScript-based build tool. So you can see right here we generate all the platforms that are supported through CordovaJS individually, and we also run our unit tests. So those are our unit tests running in Node, just for easy integration with like controlled integration servers or like sending it off as reports. Or we also realize we run in, we are by definition running in the browser, so we have the ability to also run those exact same tests in the browser. So this is all the tests that we have on the JavaScript layer running in the browser. Same tests as what ran here. We just kind of fire up a little Express server to run them. So all that is pretty easy to do. Like the Jake file format is pretty simple. It's just if you're familiar with JavaScript, you can use it. So this is the task build. So we just require in our packager, grab the commit ID because we want to tag the commit of each generated one, because CordovaJS is now vendored into each platform rather than being included in. And then you see we exec basically packager generate each of the platforms and complete. It's really not a whole lot of like magic happening there. But what's really cool about like the whole CordovaJS thing is you'll see in the lib folder, everything's kind of in the lib folder. I tend to structure my projects like an NPM module. So inside the lib folder, we have this common folder. And in that common folder is where everything that's cross-platform should live. Ideally, all the JavaScript should be cross-platform. We realize that it doesn't really happen that way. So you'll see the idea of common plugins. So there's basically what we call package.js files, which are the like metadata for how to build up the platform. So this is basically, we have object Cordova that we path the require in Cordova. children of that, we have the exec, which we require in Cordova exec, and so on and so forth. Legacy support, we still dump in PhoneGap, which is basically the exact same module. And then this is all the common modules brought into it. So you can see Navigator accelerometer path is Cordova plugin accelerometer. So that's pretty neat. And then to support as a platform, all a platform really needs to do is supply their bridge to native, which is the exec call. So Android here, this has their the exec, so it takes standard success fail stuff. And this is all that specific code for Android on how to bridge down to native, which is different than, obviously, iOS. iOS has its own way of going to the native. So what this allowed us to do, we kind of merge and combine each of these folders in to generate these JavaScript layers so that at the end, like, you have this platform file. So there's initialize if we need any kind of code to bootstrap up the platform a little bit more. You can see there's that concept of the objects again. So that will dump those objects onto the window object. We have also have the concept of mixing in extra stuff on top of what the standard platform was brought in. So for example, I think a good one is to look at iOS plugin notification. So for beep on iOS, rather than bridging down to native, it just news up a media object and plays beep.wav. So it allows us to really mix in those platform-specific behaviors without having to bundle up the entire JavaScript. Now, one of the other cool things that I started to see, like once we implemented, we did it for the top, like BlackBerry, iOS, Android. WinPhone 7 started coming on. And then some of the other platforms started to come on. So Bada came on after. And if you look at the Bada exec module, and this is where it really struck me when I started looking at where this project was going and the inspiration from Ripple. So this is the exec module for Bada. So you can see it just has this plugins array here. This requires in all the plugin modules for each of those. And basically, calls plugin service action and try catches in and logs it if it fails. And I saw this code. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. Because if I went to Ripple and look at how I do that bridge module that, if you remember, I showed, I was like, holy cow. The cross-pollination of these projects really started to take heat. And it was really neat watching people taking what we were doing in Ripple and bringing it to Cordova and really making these projects tighter and closer. Now, one last thing I want to show you, those tests that I mentioned. One of the things I want to get kind of help, if you want to come up and talk to me after, I'm a huge believer in unit testing, and I think that the JavaScript layer is such a complicated beast. I want to be able to have us run these tests that you saw before we even have to deploy these on actual devices. There's a lot of code there. There's a lot of call this handler if it's this, not this type, or raise the error callback, validate the plugin. So you can see a lot of the tests are here. So this is our test done in I think Jasmine. So basically, it's a BDD framework. All these tests are running without the need of a native platform. So you don't, like you saw, I did not have to load this or compile this on a phone to run these tests. I want to get a lot more code coverage for our JavaScript layer on there. So if you have some time, some cycles to spare, definitely come talk to me and we can figure out. So lastly, just a couple pointers. There's the Ripple code base is just under GitHub BlackBerry Ripple UI. It's completely open source. The Apache incubator CordovaJS, that's where the core of the code for JavaScript. Slides I had, if you have a crazy fetish for ponies, you can get all the images I just showed you on my GitHub account. Don't go to Google Images for pony images, because you can't unsee what you will see. lastly, just big thanks for having me out here. This has been a blast, and can't wait to drink later.